This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 164 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. And today I've got a pleading title. It's called Please Travel with Your Children. It's actually a while since I've devoted an episode to any kind of topic related to traveling with kids, but I still feel really strongly about it. And the title, Please Travel with Your Children, actually harks back to something or an incident I recall from 15 plus years ago when I was living and working and teaching in Europe. And I'll always remember, even though I didn't have kids of my own at the time, it really stuck out to me as an unusual and unnecessary thing. There was someone who was like a manager at a place I was teaching English at, and he and his wife took off on this really interesting sounding holiday to Oman. And it was only later that I learnt that they had left their kids, who I think were like 8 and 10 or so. Even in my mind at that stage, a pretty good age to travel with. They'd left them home with grandparents because they just wanted to travel without them. And of course, you might know I was lucky enough to be taken traveling as a 9-year-old by my parents. And I'm sure they never even contemplated leaving me at home because taking me and my sister was half the point of going, if not more than half the point, because they knew how good it would be for us to travel in foreign countries and learn things and, all of the good stuff that comes from traveling. So I've often thought of that man, and I did learn that it was kind of a habit that they often traveled without their children, or maybe usually, always, I don't know. Each to their own, but my plea really is please travel with your children because it's so good for them in so many ways. And my guests today will all vouch for that as well. So first up, I have Nicci O'Mara, who is on the Thoughtful Travel Podcast for the first time, but she has so much good stuff to say about traveling with kids. We started off talking about travels that stretch your comfort zone and stretch your kids' comfort zones when you travel.
Travel with kids is probably one of the most amazing, nerve-wracking, fun. It's got the highs and lows of everything when you travel with kids. I travelled a lot before I had kids. I lived overseas for a few years, did a lot of travel. And then when the kids came along, I think that in itself actually took me out of my comfort zone was
very true.
was just actually having to think of all of the millions of things that come with, traveling with kids of certain ages. But I think once we get over those things, when it comes to getting kids out of their comfort zone, it can be anything from taking them to the airport, taking them through airport security, putting them on a plane. Those type of things take kids out of their comfort zone, let alone when you take them to on a busy tour. You're going through the Colosseum and there are people everywhere and they're speaking different languages and there's different smells. All of those things actually I've found I've got 2 boys and they're now aged 9 and 11. And over the years I've found they've become so adaptable to different situations because of the travel that we've done. And that's both in Australia and overseas as well. So we're we make sure that when we go places like a few years ago, we went to Italy and Denmark and Singapore and a few other places. And, of course, they speak a different language. So we taught the boys just basic, nothing. I'm not a language teacher or anything. I'm not a super mum. So
I'm glad to hear that.
We just taught them, I just taught them a few phrases, really important things of your pleases and thank yous and how to actually ask for a drink or an ice cream and things along those lines, the important stuff in the world.
That's great. Yes, ice cream, definitely.
So them, the confidence that it gave them, because I was actually also the nasty mum who sat there and went, come on, boys, you can do it. Go in there and ask them for a loaf of bread. And we'd rehearse it before they'd go in and things like that. And that took them so far out of their comfort zone, because they weren't walking into the local shop that they've walked into 1,000 times. Everything was different. And they did it, and they walked back out every single time with the biggest smiles on their face going, you know what, Mum? We did it, and that was really cool.
That is awesome. I have to confess, I've never thought to get my son to do that. I don't know why. I guess maybe there's one of him, he probably would feel worried going and doing it by himself, but that is such a brilliant idea. You've actually given me goosebumps, because I just think it's such a simple thing. But yes, a lot of adults are scared to do that. But if you can get your kids to be able to do that, that's such an empowering, confidence building thing to do.
Yes, yeah. And look, it's much easier to get them to do it than I'm just joking. But I think my parents, we travelled to Europe when I think our first really big overseas trip was when I was 11. Mm-hmm. And my mother did the same thing to me. And it was fantastic. And I can still remember, I think, 2 phrases in Danish and 1 in German. And can I have a piece of cake?
Yeah, perfect.
And it's just random things. And I still, many, many years later, remember how to say those phrases. So it's so funny, the things that actually stay in your mind and go with you. Yeah. But even things along the lines of everything for kids, meeting new kids in playgrounds. I mean, how many times have your son, he would want to meet, and my kids, they want to meet other kids when they're away. But, of course, often language is a barrier, or just the fact that they don't know them. Yeah. So they actually have to get out of their comfort zone. And it's beautiful, because often they have more confidence in that side of things than we do. Mm. And then also when things go wrong, because something always goes wrong. It doesn't have to be, huge, but, trains are missed and flights are delayed, and someone falls into the water, which I had one.
Oh, do tell. Where? What kind of water?
Going through Denmark, I do, and he has improved. I don't think he did it on our last couple of trips, but when my youngest was 6, travelling through Denmark, he every body of water we went near, he would just walk on the edge or skip over there, and he would land in the water every single time.
Oh dear.
And I don't know why you'd go, we're just going to the medieval centre, so I'm not taking a spare pair of clothes because he's 6 and
you don't need spare clothes for a short outing like that with a 6-year-old, do you?
Mountain times he got back in the car nude because he was saturated. Anyway, it was very funny, but look, we all live and learn, and it's one of those things with travelling. I find it's such a great education for them, because I'm talking about the medieval centre, which was on the island of Lolland in Denmark. I don't know if you've been there.
No, now I want to go back.
It was fantastic. We loved it. But things there, they learnt, the culture. They learnt about mechanics of, the trebuchets, fire, because they got to actually fire a trebuchet, which is, cool. One of those big, the big cannon type things. And they got to learn the old ways, which we don't have in Australia because, we do have in Australia, but it's so different from the Indigenous way to the Danish, heritage.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's so wonderful for them to learn that. So, I mean, I find, another great benefit of travelling with kids is the fact that they they soak in all this information about the culture and languages. Geography is a huge one, and history, but even science of, well, why does the toilet flush the other way when you go to America? And
oh, so much, and because it's so experiential, so hands-on, that it's, something learnt like that on a trip is going to stick with them so much more effectively than, just being at school and seeing it in a textbook or something. So after chatting with Nicci, I am totally kicking myself that I never thought of training up my son to go into bakeries or ice cream shops and ask for treats in multiple languages. That is such a cool idea. So it's now on the agenda for future trips for sure. But I really love chatting with Nicci about all of the good reasons to travel with kids. I'm glad my son is not the kind who regularly falls into water though, I have to say. But also especially that they learn so much that's actually, educational and academic as well, in such a way that they always will remember it. My son already has the most amazing geography skills, and especially when it comes to maps and locating places and, capitals and currencies and stuff. And I am a bit annoyed really, because I actually pride myself on having pretty good geography because of my travels as well. But we'll often play a game at bedtime where we, search for things on the map. We've got a big world map in the bedroom, and I'm really upset at how often he knows things better than me. And, that's not fair, that young, well-travelled brain. So, it's a bit frustrating, but I would rather he was like that than didn't know anything. Anyway, I'll get over it. My next guests today are AJ and Natasha, who did a really big trip travelling the world with their young son, and also agree that it's really, really good for him.
I'm always the reluctant world traveler. I put that in my profile everywhere. I'm, in general, perpetually discontent. So for me, traveling in general was always hard. So traveling with the kids sounds like I want to tell people I'm scared of flying. I like things organized, and everything in traveling is usually chaos. So in spite of all of that, I think traveling with kids is one of the most wonderful things, mostly because you are fully focused on your children and you're fully focused on the moment and enjoying that experience with them. And I think one of the things that I always feel like children make you focus on the moment in general. Like if you are at home, we have a 3-year-old. If you're at home and you're trying to do multiple things, if your child wants you to do something, most likely you're going to drop everything and do it because they're just being annoying about it. So I think the same thing happens while traveling. And it's so great because children, especially at a very young age, will kind of go along with everything. So if you are on a plane, like you were at the airport and let's say your flight is delayed, here you are feeling cranky and depressed, and you're like, the flight is delayed, and your child just wants to run around the airport and have fun. Or in our son's case, he wants to count numbers in the terminal. And it just becomes an experience and a game. So every negative thing that you can think about travel, you actually don't focus on it as much when you're with your child. And it's just, I think the memories you create, the time you spend, and the focus you have on travel is better with kids. And I'm less anxious traveling with my son than I am without him, surprisingly.
Oh, that's interesting, because I get more, as he's older, it's not so bad, but especially when he was younger, I was more anxious traveling with him because I was always worried, what would I do if something happened to him or if he got sick?
Yeah, so I think that's a worry in general. Like, I think as a parent, you always worry about that. But I think I'm always so focused on him. I'm less anxious about me doing certain things. I'm less focused on myself. So for me, my anxiety levels just focus on myself are so high. So focus on him is actually less. It's anxiety, but it's just less for some reason. Yeah.
I think the other couple of things that I enjoy about traveling with kids is, number one, I felt like when we took our trip across the world, we really got closer together as a family. So when you spend, we spent 9 months on the road, and when you spend 9 months together, we had a lot of fights. Between a spouse. But one of the cool things about when you're traveling is if you're angry with your spouse, you really can't go anywhere. You're on a cruise ship, you have to go back to your cabin, and you just can't leave or go to a different room or something like that. You have to resolve the fight. Yeah, exactly. So what we found in general was we had a lot of fights at the start of the trip, and then as time went on, the number of fights we had kept going down, and then we kept on, and then we got better as a couple, and in resolving these things. And I would also say, having a little one with us probably helps in these fights too, because like we are fighting, and then he says something cute or something like you just forget about like the fact you're fighting, and,
or he's hungry or something.
Yeah, and you just focus on him, and I think it just makes us calmer.
Right.
And we fight better too around him.
Yeah. And I think like overall, I feel travel like has become better. I know like earlier on, I could think of, even less than 10 years ago, when there was no Airbnb, like traveling to a hotel and, booking 2 rooms, maybe you need a child in another room, like feel like there are things around here now, like, with Airbnb, you can get like a house, so you can kind of live home away from home almost. So you can kind of have that feeling of home while you're traveling. And I think that kind of stuff has really made it easier to travel with kids.
I agree completely with that, because I know when I travel with my son, just that he's got that extra space around, and he can take his toy cars out or whatever. It's just in a hotel room often there's not even any floor space, and kids need to be on the floor a lot, and in an Airbnb, even an apartment, you've got that living room or something that's a bit of extra space.
Yeah, and it was like a new home for him all the time. And, they get hungry in the morning, so you're not like sitting around in a hotel buffet. So it just makes life easier.
Yeah, I think the last thing, and it's probably more a parenting thing that I really enjoyed about the trip, was I could see 2 things. Number one, I could see us becoming more flexible and more relaxed as parents. Mm-hmm. So you go through these different situations, and when you're a parent, like, you worry about everything, right? And you worry about sleep schedules and what will my son eat, and all kinds of things that go through your head. And then you watch this little one adapt and be okay with all kinds of situations, all kinds of times, all kinds of like flights, whatever. And you just realize like, those things really don't matter as much as we make it out to be. So I think you just become, you just go more with the flow. And I also think for him, like he got to try out foods all across the world. Like he ate cumin chicken in China. He obviously loved food in India. He ate like Italian bread. So here he is, this little 3-year-old trying out foods all over the world. And meeting people from all over the world. So I just feel like even in that young of a mind, you're probably making him more open-minded, more adaptable, more flexible. Mm-hmm. Just a child.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I 100% agree. So my son's 9 now, and I've always traveled a lot with him, and I am 100% certain that like the travels we did when he was 3 or 4 completely shaped how he is today. And because he's exactly like that, he's very open-minded. He's very, he knows there's lots of different kinds of people and different languages and different cultures and different foods. And that's just absolutely normal to him because he's been exposed to it so much. So I'm sure that you'll find with your son it's exactly what does happen to him. So you've done him a great big favor.
Yes. He's not going to remember anything, so he might hate us, but, we have been.
Then we hope to take another big trip in the next few years.
That's the plan. We would love to do this
so
again.
Our plan is to hopefully do this every 5 to 6 years.
Yeah.
What a great plan. That's awesome. Yeah, I don't think it's important that they don't remember. I think that it shapes their personality so much that.
I agree with that.
Yeah. 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 There's lots of things that my son doesn't remember about our early trips, and some he doesn't really remember at all, but I've still seen how it's changed him.
So just in case you didn't get my message out of that, it is this, the people who say, oh, why would you take your kids traveling when they're too young to remember it? Take them, please, traveling. I dispute that so strongly that it's a waste taking them when they can't remember it, because kids don't remember anything really about their early childhood, but it completely shapes them. No one would disagree with that. So why doesn't traveling shape them as well? So please take them. Okay, I'll get down off my high horse. My final guest today is Suzanne Kamata, who's also on the Thoughtful Travel podcast for the first time today. And she has a really interesting perspective on why it's really important for her that her kids got to travel a lot.
In my case, I'm an American married to a Japanese man living in Japan. And we live in a rural part of Japan, so it's not like international, cosmopolitan Tokyo or Osaka like that.
Mm-hmm.
So our children are biracial, and I wanted them to also be bicultural. And it was probably difficult for them to grow up in this kind of remote part of Japan as one of very, very few mixed race children.
Mm.
And there's a problem of bullying in Japan, especially of kids who are different in any way and mixed race. And my daughter has disabilities, and both of my kids are mixed race, so that seems to make them bully magnets.
Mm.
So I wanted them to have a wider view of the world, first of all, and to know that things were not ideal in their hometown, like there was another world out there, and that might be different and more accepting of them. So that was one very important reason for me to take my kids out to other places, other countries.
Mm-hmm.
So we tried to take them back to America as maybe once a year, and we traveled around Japan too, and we took them to historically significant places as well, because in their history classes in Japan they get the Japanese view of history, and that might be a bit different from the American view of history.
Yeah.
I wanted them to have a broader view of the world, and so that was the main reason, right?
Yeah,
also,
they're pretty important reasons. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, also because I love traveling, and I didn't want to stop traveling just because I had kids, and
that's a good reason too. I feel a bit the same.
a big reason, yeah. So I found a way to adapt my travels and to enjoy.
And what do you think your kids have learnt from your travels? Do you think they've learnt what you wanted them to learn, or have there been other things that they've learned as well?
I do. I think it did help them to go out and see different places. And my son, like, I was worried that they would, get tired of traveling, because some kids, like, they go to Italy, they go to, Bali or whatever, and then when they're older, they don't want to travel. They want to hang out with their friends at home. So I was worried that would happen. But my son, he continues to be interested in travel, and even though he went on like school trips to Hawaii and Guam, and we took him to various places in the United States, like, he's still interested in travel, and he wound up going to a university where there are lots of international students. So instead of coming home, like, during spring break, he went to Taiwan.
With some of his university friends?
Yeah, with one of his new friends from Taiwan.
Oh, awesome.
And last summer, he came home briefly, but he also went to Korea for a sort of it's kind of a symposium type thing. So he's really interested in meeting people from other countries, and he's interested in traveling.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, so I think, you didn't make him sick of it.
Yeah, and my daughter has always been really enthusiastic about traveling, and she'd watch these travelogues on television, and she'd say, I want to go there, I want to go there, I want to go there.
It's a long list.
So that's great, because I could take her with me places, and and my husband is less enthusiastic about travel as the years go by, but my kids remain, excited about visiting new places, so at least I could travel with them.
I think every parent has their own particular reasons that they really want to take their kids travelling, and I really liked Suzanne's explanation of hers. Suzanne actually earlier this year published an amazing book. I recently read it. It's called Squeaky Wheels, and it's all about the travels she's done with her daughter. The subtitle actually explains it well. It says, "Travels with my daughter by train, plane, metro, tuk-tuk and wheelchair." And of course her daughter is deaf and has cerebral palsy. and that, of course, introduces a few extra challenges on her travels, but still there've been just so many benefits from doing it. I've got some more of our interview to play in a future episode as well. Anyway, please take your kids traveling. I probably am preaching to the converted mostly, but if you have any doubts about it, please do it. I promise it is good for everyone. Anyway, thank you very much for listening to episode 164 of the Thoughtful Travel podcast. A big thank you to my guests. First up, I chatted with Nicci O'Mara from Trip Chiefs. She's at tripchiefs.com, and she has lots of really good advice there, and even some like a free e-course and stuff for parents who are worried about taking their kids traveling for the first time and want to, figure out get past all of the problems and the reasons that they might be reluctant to, and just kind of get out there and do it. There's lots of really good resources at Trip Chiefs. Next, thank you to Natasha and AJ from the Two Idiots Travel blog, and you can find them at twoidiotstravel.com. The 2 is the number 2. And lastly, I chatted with Suzanne Kamata, and you can find her at suzannekamata.com. And I'll also leave a link in the show notes to her book, Squeaky Wheels. And the show notes for this episode will be at notaballerina.com/164. Now, some of you already will be on the newsletter or mailing list for the Thoughtful Travel podcast. But if you're not, then I'll also leave a link in the show notes to sign up to that, because I've just relaunched it recently as Thoughtful Travel Thursday. And every Thursday you get an email with a link to the newest episode, but also a few links to some really interesting stuff to read around the web, the kind of thing that we thoughtful travelers want to read. So do come along and sign up for that. Thank you very much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.